Nick Nurse just gave an interview that has me extremely excited about this upcoming season. He's talking about Precious Achiuwa like he's a shoo-in for most improved player next year. He's talking about the role of Christian Koloko coming into this team for this next season. He even touched on Jalen Harris and OG Anunoby's trade requests. So we have a lot to dive into on that front. There's also more trade rumors with the Utah Jazz and a whole lot of stuff that we have to discuss. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors side, just breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And as I've been saying on the last few podcasts, we're on that road to 25k subs, so I appreciate everyone that's been checking out the videos. If you want to hit subscribe, mean a lot to me, so I appreciate you all. But we have some crazy news to talk about, and we're discussing the real reason the Raptors did not trade for a center, did not sign a center this offseason, and it's coming straight from the coach's mouth. Nick Nurse discussed a lot of the players. He went on a podcast, actually a Hungarian podcast, Rap City, then a few Hungarian words I'm not sure how to pronounce. Most of the podcast was in Hungarian until Nick Nurse ended up coming on, and the podcaster gave a really strong interview. It switched to English, and Nick Nurse drop some quotes, drop some bombs on us that have me extremely excited. And the two that really had me going were specifically around the center position. Now, I know that I've been pushing the Precious propaganda, right, this entire last year, even when he was looking not too polished just yet on the offensive end and all that sort of stuff. But my goodness, Nick Nurse has pushed me out of the driver's seat and got straight in it in terms of pushing the Precious propaganda, because I am juiced for Precious Achiuwa coming into this season. Just some direct quotes from Nick Nurse talking about Precious in this one. You can really expect him to take a step up this year. Something happened to him this offseason where he knows what it takes to succeed in the NBA, and he's putting it all together. There's a total focus on development for Precious Achiuwa at this point, and he is on an absolute mission to take his game to the next level. So, and obviously, coaches praise their players. He talked about Scottie Barnes potentially becoming an all-star and the leap he expects him to make. Talked about OG getting healthy and how last year was a tough year for him, given the fact he suffered 2 serious injuries and all that sort of stuff. And, they're going to bounce back. Thaddeus Young's fit with the squad. It's going to be a lot better. But the tone of voice, the excitement that came out from Nick Nurse's voice, I'll link the interview down below because it's something to get you excited about. When he was speaking on Precious Achiuwa, there's no other way to describe than he was talking like him. It's the same way people were raving about Pascal going into that 2019 season, because people sort of associate that year with, Kawhi Leonard coming in, and we knew we'd have a second option in Pascal come alongside of Kyle Lowry that would be surefire contenders. But people might not remember the season prior to that 2019 year, Pascal Siakam was coming off the bench. He was a part of that bench mob and that 1 seed and all that sort of stuff. Then we heard guys like Zach Lowe, Brian Windhorst, Nick Nurse giving interviews like these in the offseason talking about, okay, Pascal Siakam's taking that leap. And then what did he do? One from bench player. He didn't even start the first game of the season. It was in fact CJ Miles who had that on day 1. But following that first game, right, Nick Nurse said, okay, no more fooling around. Siakam's going into that starting lineup, and he ended up winning Most Improved Player along with an NBA championship. And, we'll see what happens about the NBA championship front, but if Precious Achiuwa takes that leap the way Nick Nurse is talking, who knows, man? Who knows? And that's the real reason we didn't acquire center, because Precious Achiuwa is going to need those minutes. And before I segue also into Christian Koloko, look at this picture coming out of Precious. His head is at the rim on a windmill dunk. Precious Achiuwa, he's an uber athlete. We knew this. We knew he's a rim protector. I talked about the development he made over the course of last season in a recent video, but he's only going to take another step further. So exciting stuff, especially when Nick Nurse is gassing him up like that. So that's one thing. Another reason we didn't trade or sign a center this offseason is because Christian Koloko is going to have a real role on this roster. Nurse also talked, and there's question marks right now. I'm sure a lot of it just has to do with everything up in the air, considering trade situations and all that sort of stuff. But Christian Koloko currently is not signed to the Toronto Raptors, but he will 100% will be on a guaranteed contract. He's not one of those guys fighting for a bottom roster spot. If you want a full breakdown on the Toronto Raptors roster decisions that have to be made, check out our last video. But Koloko's coming in, and Nick Nurse mentioned that he expects Koloko to be a rotation player. He spoke on his 3-point jump shot and essentially that he's working extremely hard on it. Maybe in 3 to 6 months, we'll see him splashing them down in games. But just given the speed, right, the defenses and all that sort of stuff, he doesn't expect him to come out and immediately be, a 3-point sniper right off the bat. But he said the jumper is developing, it's coming along. And don't be surprised if midway through next season we see Koloko hitting jumpers. And while he doesn't see him as a starting center, because I think that's, obviously we had our core 5 last year and Precious off the bench, but if there's someone eclipsing the center position in terms of jumping into the starting lineup, it's going to be Precious. But he did say he does see Koloko being an actual role player. He thinks he'll be in the rotation, and that's pretty huge when you have a 2nd round pick. Obviously, our 2 2nd round picks last season were mostly spending time in the G League, so Koloko could have a real role on this team going into next year, and that puts us with 2 true centers in Precious and Koloko next season. So, I'm encouraged. I'm happy that Nick Nurse is high on Koloko as well. So that's pretty solid as well. I touched on his OG comments. Also talked about how Scottie Barnes is going to at minimum be a multi-time All-Star. So you love that. But I've been kind of rambling about this interview, but I'm leaving a full segment to a guy that Raptors fans love to talk about, Jalen Harris. Nick Nurse did also drop Jalen Harris. The interviewer brought up, and he's an all-NBA interviewer as well. So I'm surprised about the knowledge. Usually people don't remember fringe players that got cut and stuff from teams, but he knew Jalen Harris, right? He knew this guy, how Raptors fans have been, some of them have been infatuated with Jalen Harris, and apparently he had a very, I've discussed it. I thought he didn't have the greatest season in Europe last year, but the interviewer essentially said he had a really strong season in Europe, and Nurse broke down that said, the Raptors really like this guy, and obviously they have the rights to him, and there were discussions about potentially bringing him back to the Toronto Raptors for this year. However, he essentially alluded to the fact that it was extremely unlikely, just essentially shot down any hypotheticals of Jalen Harris rejoining the team this season. Said, even though we have the rights and stuff, said, there's been talks about it, but there doesn't seem to be anything immediate with him actually joining the squad. But he did sort of say, in the future, they'd be open to potentially getting Jalen Harris to rejoin the roster. So for all the Jalen Harris heads out there, that you got your dose, you got your fix of Jalen Harris news. But don't expect him to be on the roster at any point this season, especially with the logjam we sort of have at that wing guard position in terms of the deep bench. Not our logjam is truly at the 6'9" spot, but we have Svi Mykhailiuk fighting for a roster spot. Even though he's guaranteed, but he could potentially get waived. Justin Champagnie there, right? Juancho Hernan-Gomez now coming in, filling up one of those roster spots. Armani Brooks, right? All those guys I think are better, more suited than a Jalen Harris. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I know people like to have their eyes on Jalen. But the next thing we're discussing, the next thing we're talking about is Raptors Jazz trade talks persist. Now, I don't want to get too fishy, but Jake Fisher's coming out and, using his insider, still discussing, saying that on a podcast that Toronto, from my understanding, the Raptors and Jazz have been in trade talks all off season, from Gobert to Bogdanovic and definitely Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell's been a huge topic of discussion amongst Raptors fans over the past week, especially when Shams of The Athletic came out and essentially said that we're one of the teams in the race for him. And then we had that sketchy report saying that we were front runners and all that sort of stuff. And I made my point clear. I know it's split in terms of what Raptors fans want to happen with Donovan Mitchell specifically, but firstly, on the Utah Jazz front, I wouldn't mind getting a Patrick Beverley, certainly, because I think we can get him for pretty cheap. Jordan Clarkson, if we can get him for cheap as well, even though I think he'd be more expensive, I'd love to bring that guy in as well. Bogdanovic, given his contract hit, he's about roughly $20 million per year. The only way the Raptors are acquiring Bogdanovic is if they give up Gary Trent Jr. Big no from me. I want my star boy in this on this Raptors team next season, unless we're getting a superstar, right? Those are the fringe guys, the role players that I'd like to see from the Utah Jazz. But Donovan Mitchell, I'm pro Donovan, and what I did say I would not give up Gary, OG, and picks, where I'd like to see us match salary some other way. I would not do that deal, just given the defense we'd be sacking, as well as the growth we could see from any of those two players, right? That's my stance on that front. However, if we could get Donovan Mitchell, people are talking like him and Fred would be an unplayable backcourt. We had two, and I know someone fact-checked me or said that when I said our backcourt when we won the championship was Danny Green and Kyle Lowry. And yes, that was the starting backcourt. But the backcourt that played the most minutes in that playoff run was, especially in the Bucks and Warriors series, was Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. Danny Green started those games, but wasn't getting the same amount of minutes as Fred VanVleet. Fred VanVleet had a Finals MVP vote. That's how much he was playing in that NBA Finals. So I'm eclipsing him over Danny Green, but I digress on that point. But we can't run lower 6 foot guards, right? People always question Fred's and those types of guys' height, but Donovan Mitchell's an absolute elite scorer, right? He puts up 30 pieces like it's nothing in the playoffs. And I know he's a turnstile on defense, but I think in a Raptor system where there's more wing defense, right? Where Donovan Mitchell isn't even though he's not a good defender by any means, he doesn't have the likes of a 40, 50-year-old Mike Conley along his side, a Bojan Bogdanovic on his side, right? He's going to be able to play better in a Raptor system, right? That's my take there. But he is certainly a turnstile in defense. We saw Brunson absolutely cook him up and Terrence Mann cook him up in last year's playoffs. But Raptors need that go-to scorer that can get those tough buckets. Now, Gary Trent Jr. could potentially be that guy. I'm hoping he develops into that player, but Donovan Mitchell's already at that player and one of the best in the league at it. So if we can get him for not too high of an asking price, by all means, bring him in, but the asking price will likely be too high. And Danny Ainge and Masai Ujiri, they're like a rock and a movable object or something, or they're colliding. That's not the analogy, but they likely won't be able to. They only like to make trades where they finesse, so I won't see a deal potentially being done. But who knows? And if it could happen, I like to see Donovan Mitchell in a Raptors uniform, not just in a dunk contest. So that's that front. We also had Bebe Nogueira coming out clutch again. Obviously, people, Raptors Digest fans know, right? No, Bebe is one of my favorite players. Lucas Nogueira is one of my favorite Raptors of all time. And this guy went on a story posting. It wasn't IG Live. It was just a bunch of stories being posted, casually posting some old scouting reports for the playoffs for the Toronto Raptors. And man, these are pretty interesting. These are just a couple screenshots from the IG Live, zoomed in so you guys can see them. I know on the tiny screens it's hard to see these sometimes, but it's a little bit blurry because it's a screenshot from an Instagram story. But talking about LeBron James, below average defending the ball handler or screener. That's right. Gotta match up on LeBron James there. Bradley Beal, average pick and roll defender. They talk about where he's scoring. Right, there's a lot of emphasis on points per possession. They talk about true shooting percentage a lot in these scouting reports. They got the zones and all that. But if you looked at the discussions, and these I just straight up couldn't get a good screenshot well enough to essentially show on top of the screen. But the breakdowns on specific player goals, it's very high level stuff. And obviously the Raptors have been credited with having some of the best scouting reports in the league. I find it pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to see the inside of these ones here. I know people were absolutely flaming it. Obviously, Dwayne Casey was the head coach at this time when Bebe was on the squad during this playoff run specifically, and they're roasting that Dwayne Casey didn't have anything cooking up. Obviously, Thaddeus Young was praising the Raptors, saying they had the best scouting reports in the league midway through this year. So people gotta stop trashing Dwayne Casey. Only when he's talking nonsense about the Pistons being better than the Raptors. That's the only time we have the right to trash on Dwayne Casey. He's a good coach for us. But it was if you want to give that a little throw up there, LeBron James, good at ball handler, good in the pick and roll and all that sort of stuff. Catches and shoots on closeouts, a low volume, all that. I won't read through this entire scouting report. You guys know how LeBron James and Bradley Beal play, but cool seeing how it's all laid out for an actual NBA team. But the final thing we're discussing, the final thing we're breaking down in this podcast is Scottie Barnes got on the cover of Slam magazine. This is pretty cool. Obviously, the Rookie of the Year, getting some love by Slam, and he's got a new nickname apparently too. He's rocking the SB chain, rocking the Raptors city jerseys from last year. I'm surprised they didn't get him rocking the new ones, but or earned jerseys. I don't know what the specific name on all the Nike jerseys are, but nickname North Star for Scottie Barnes. I don't know what you guys think. Obviously, the Starboy, or I'm pressing the wrong buttons. The Starboy is already kind of taken for the Toronto Raptors. The North Star, are these names too familiar? Are they too much the same to have for your starting, 2 and 3 on the squad? I don't know. I like Scottie Barnes, the North Star. It's a pretty cool nickname. Leave your new Scottie Barnes nicknames down below. We'll just keep giving him the Scottie Barnes Award. Maybe just Scottie Barnes Award. Flip the meaning of a nickname. Make it longer. Make it crazier. I don't know. But you guys are the best to make this far. Check out the Instagram, the TikTok, the Twitter, all that cool stuff. As mentioned, if you made it this far in this video, subscribe to the channel. Helps us out big time. We're on that road to 25K subscribers. Anyways, enough of me rambling. You guys are the best. I'm signing out. Cheers.